This deep dive is actually brought to you by Business Link Media Group. And, before we jump in, I want you to picture something.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine building this, absolutely world-class theme park, right? It draws 13 million people a year. But you just completely forget to build a parking lot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no access highway, no transit link. You just expect millions of people to park 3 towns over and just sort of figure it out.
Right, which sounds, totally absurd when you frame it like that.
Exactly, but that is essentially what one of Canada's biggest tourist magnets has done for the last 97 years.
Yeah, looking at the infrastructure map of the Niagara region, that is the literal reality on the ground.
So yesterday, on May 7th, I was actually sitting in the audience at a Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce event.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I was listening to this fireside chat about the Niagara District Airport. Its aviation code is YCM. And sitting in that room, looking at the data they presented, the scale of the missed opportunity was just staggering.
It really is. We are talking about a region with, what, over 500,000 residents?
Yeah, 545,000. It's actually the 13th largest census metropolitan area in Canada.
Right. And it brings in 12 to 13 million tourists every single year.
But, and this is the crazy part, if you look at the list of Canada's top passenger airports, Niagara does not even register. At all.
No, it's a massive gap. Dan Pilon, the airport's CEO, brought up this statistic during the event that he calls the 25-kilometer problem.
The 25-kilometer problem.
Exactly. Niagara is literally the only top tourist destination in the entire country that does not have a commercial scheduled service airport within 25 kilometers of its city center.
Which means, if you're a tourist and you're flying in from, London or Tokyo.
You're landing at Toronto Pearson or maybe Hamilton.
Right. You grab your luggage and you immediately face this 1 to 2 hour drive down the QEW highway just to literally start your vacation.
Which is brutal. The friction there is just immense.
Completely. And that friction actually explains a really critical data point from the presentation. Niagara's tourism has effectively flatlined over the last 50 years.
Wow. 50 years?
Yeah. They built the hotels, they have the casinos, the wineries. The attractions are clearly there.
But they're hitting a structural wall.
Exactly. The region is finally realizing that without seamless direct air access, they have essentially capped their own growth.
But fixing that kind of infrastructure gap, normally that requires billions of dollars, right? And decades of, environmental assessment.
Oh, for sure. You can't just pave a runway in a cornfield and suddenly call it a commercial hub.
Right. But during the keynote, Dan Pilon actually pointed to a blueprint from just down the road that shows a much, much faster path. He brought up Toronto's Billy Bishop Airport.
Which is such a fascinating comparison.
It is, because the Billy Bishop parallel reveals this huge misunderstanding most people have about how airports actually scale. Right. So back in 2006, Billy Bishop was this heavily subsidized, totally underutilized airstrip. They were handling maybe 22,300 passengers a year.
Which is nothing for an airport.
Basically nothing.
No.
But over the next 3 years, they exploded to 770,000 passengers. And today, they handle over 2 million.
2 million. And the crucial detail here, the thing that really stuck with me, is that they didn't touch the runway.
Yet,
they literally didn't extend it by a single inch. They just built a passenger terminal.
Which proves that the airside asset, the actual concrete runway, is rarely the limiting factor for regional airports. The real bottleneck is almost always the groundside processing capability.
Right.
And that leads to this great analogy Dan Pilon used. He said if building a commercial airport from scratch is a 100-meter dash, YCM is actually already starting at the 60-meter mark.
Okay, I really want to break down what that 60-meter head start actually means, because it isn't just about, having pavement on the ground.
Oh, definitely not.
YCM already possesses Transport Canada certification. They have the Canada Border Services Agency, or CBSA, operating on-site right now.
Right.
They have active Navy Canada air traffic control towers. And get this, they have a 5,000-foot runway, which is actually 500 feet longer than Billy Bishop's.
Yeah, that's huge. And for anyone listening who's wondering, why does having those agencies already on site even matter?
Yeah, why do we care?
Securing airspace design approval from MV Canada or, establishing a CBSA port of entry from scratch, That can take over a decade of bureaucratic red tape.
Wow.
Yeah, and tens of millions of dollars just in feasibility studies. YCM bypasses all of that completely.
So an audience member at the event yesterday, her name was Bertha, she actually asked the most logical follow-up question.
Okay, what did she ask?
She basically pointed out, well, if we have a runway that's longer than Billy Bishop's and we have the air traffic controllers, why can't we just land a regional Embraer jet tomorrow? Like, why are we waiting?
Right. And that introduces this concept called dirty flights.
Dirty flights.
Yeah, which is a very strict aviation security classification.
Okay.
So YCM's runway is absolutely structurally capable of landing a Dash 8 or similar regional jet today.
Right.
However, you cannot legally operate a commercial scheduled flight unless you can securely screen the passengers before they board the plane.
You need CATSA, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority.
Exactly. Without a physical CATSA screening checkpoint, any flight that leaves Niagara arrives at its destination as a dirty flight.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning the passengers have not been vetted to enter the secure zone of the receiving airport. It basically breaks the entire chain of custody for aviation security.
Oh, wow. So they couldn't just walk into the terminal in Toronto or wherever?
No, not at all. The destination airport would literally have to park the plane out on the tarmac, bus all those passengers to some non-secure terminal, and screen them upon arrival.
Which completely destroys the efficiency of the airline network.
Exactly. It's a logistical nightmare.
So stage one of YCM's master plan has absolutely nothing to do with pouring more concrete for planes. It is entirely about building a terminal box that can legally process and sterilize passengers so they can integrate into the national security grid.
Building that terminal is definitely step one. Yeah. But, infrastructure alone does not guarantee that the airline routes are going to show up. Airlines are incredibly risk-averse.
Which brings us to the immediate strategy they announced. And I have to admit, this part initially confused me a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're launching an Air Canada landline bus service on June 15th.
Right.
And they're also bringing back Aspen Air Charters, which is running 3 daily Piper Navajo small aircraft over to Billy Bishop. But more importantly, travelers can now go online and book a single ticket from, say, Tokyo directly to Niagara using the YCM destination code.
Right, which is a huge deal. Activating that YCM destination code on global booking platforms, it fundamentally changes the psychological geography for international travel agents.
That makes sense.
Yeah, Niagara is no longer just this day trip from Toronto. It becomes an integrated global destination.
Okay, I totally understand the booking code part, but I mean, a bus is still a bus.
Sure.
You're still sitting in highway traffic. Putting people on a branded bus feels like a really strange way to convince a massive airline to invest in a multi-million-dollar airplane route.
So the best way to look at it is to think of the bus as a data gathering instrument. It's almost like a dating phase before a corporate marriage.
Okay, a dating phase.
Yeah. Bradley Sutherland from Air Canada was actually speaking at the event, and he laid out the brutal economics of route planning.
Okay, let's hear the numbers.
Operating a single Boeing 737 route costs an airline roughly $6,500 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah, and when you factor in fuel, crew, maintenance, ground handling, that is over $30 million a year.
Wait, $30 million? You cannot build a business case for a $30 million operating expense based on a hunch that, tourists might want to fly there.
Exactly. And furthermore, legacy carriers like Air Canada, they don't operate point-to-point routes between random cities. They operate on a hub-and-spoke model.
Right.
It functions very much like an Amazon distribution network. I mean, Amazon doesn't ship a package directly from a factory to your house.
No, they route it through a massive fulfillment center.
Right, to maximize efficiency. Airlines do the exact same thing. They route regional traffic into mega hubs like Pearson to fill their larger, international flights.
So Air Canada doesn't actually want to fly passengers from Niagara to Chicago. They want to fly you from Niagara to Pearson so you can connect to their massive flight to Frankfurt or wherever.
Precisely. And to justify that short feeder route, Sutherland noted they need a very specific trifecta of traffic.
Okay, what's the trifecta?
First, leisure tourists. Second, premium business class travelers.
I like business class.
Because they're the ones paying the high fares that actually subsidize the crazy operational costs of the flight. And third, convention and group traffic, which provides stable, predictable volume even during the slow winter months.
Okay, so the landline bus service is essentially a Trojan horse.
Yes.
It generates the exact ticketing data Air Canada needs to prove that this trifecta exists year-round. And once the data proves the demand is there,
then they replace the bus with an aircraft.
That's brilliant. Now, if you are listening to this and wondering, like, why does this matter if you don't even live in Niagara? The economic ripple effect is honestly the most fascinating part of the whole presentation.
Totally.
Because Marco Marino from Niagara Economic Development, he completely shifted my perspective from tourism to corporate logistics.
Right, because tourism is the visible layer, right?
Yeah.
But global connectivity is what actually drives advanced manufacturing and foreign direct investment.
Yeah, Marino explained that when international companies send out RFIs, requests for information to, scout locations for new manufacturing plants or headquarters, their very first question is always about air connectivity.
Oh.
And being an hour away from Pearson or Buffalo is an immediate disqualifier. Companies literally walk away from the table because corporate executives and, fragile supply chains, they require immediate, localized air access.
And the macroeconomic formula for this is incredibly consistent. Historically, a fully functioning commercial hub airport generates roughly 10% of a region's total GDP.
10%.
Yeah. And Niagara's current GDP sits at about $81 billion.
Wow. Okay.
So that makes the absence of a commercial airport a $1.8 billion blind spot in their economy.
1.8 billion. See, looking through the master plan, I assumed all the future expansion was purely to capture that 1.8 billion in corporate and tourist travel. But there is a section on defense spending and NATO that completely threw me off.
Oh, yeah. That connects directly to Stage 2 of the master plan.
Right.
So after the terminal is built, Stage 2 involves extending the existing 5,000-foot runway by an additional 2,500 feet.
But how does adding 2,500 feet of pavement suddenly turn a municipal airport into a national defense asset? That seems like a massive leap.
Well, it comes down to aviation physics, basically.
Okay.
A 5,000-foot runway is perfectly fine for a regional passenger jet. However, heavy cargo aircraft, like a Boeing C-17 Globemaster or a fully loaded 767 freighter.
Massive ones.
Exactly. They physically cannot take off on 5,000 feet.
Yeah.
They need the extra length for stopping distance, and more importantly, they needed to carry the massive fuel loads required to fly heavy payloads all the way across the Atlantic.
And the federal government recently committed to meeting NATO defense spending targets, right? Which injects roughly $135 to $150 billion into the sector.
Exactly. And right next door to YCM is Fort Erie, which already hosts a significant aerospace and defense manufacturing cluster.
Oh, I see.
Right. By extending the runway to 7,500 feet, YCM transforms from just a local passenger strip into a multimodal heavy cargo facility. Defense contractors can land heavy equipment directly at the manufacturing source, integrating the airport into the national security supply chain.
Okay, so the vision scales from fixing a tourist bottleneck to a $1.8 billion economic engine, and finally to a heavy cargo defense asset.
Yeah, it's massive.
But getting there obviously requires a roadmap, and the panel pointed to Kelowna International Airport out in British Columbia as, the perfect endgame model for Niagara.
The demographic and geographic parallels are honestly striking. I mean, both are renowned agricultural and winery regions.
Sure.
Kelowna has a population of about 220,000, and they draw 2 million tourists annually.
Okay.
But despite being less than half the size of Niagara, their airport processes 2.3 million passengers a year.
I do have to push back on that comparison just a bit, though.
Yeah.
Because Kelowna is really isolated. I mean, it's a 4-hour drive over a literal mountain pass just to get to Vancouver.
Yeah, that's fair.
But Niagara is sitting right in the Golden Horseshoe. It's barely an hour away from a massive international mega hub like Pearson. Does the Kelowna model actually apply when you have that much regional competition?
It does, mostly because of a concept called leakage.
Leakage?
Yeah. Right now, millions of Niagara residents and tourists are leaking across the border to fly out of Buffalo. Or they're just dealing with the highway congestion to get to Pearson.
Ah, right.
A functional YCM captures that local catchment area. But what Niagara really wants to emulate is Kelowna's operational model.
Okay, how does that work?
Kelowna's is actually the most profitable municipally run airport in Canada.
Really?
Yeah. It operates entirely on user fees, landing fees, and terminal concessions, meaning it generates over $2 billion in economic activity with zero financial burden to local taxpayers.
Oh, wow. That self-sustaining model is definitely the ultimate goal. But, I mean, getting there requires heavy initial capital.
For sure.
Dan Pilon repeatedly used the phrase acta non verba, deeds not words. The municipalities that own YCM are aligned on the vision, but they just do not have the municipal tax base to unilaterally fund a terminal and a runway extension.
No, they don't.
They need provincial and federal funding, which obviously requires massive public buy-in.
And as we know, infrastructure projects of this scale usually face their fiercest opposition from the immediate community.
Which was my biggest question sitting in the audience. I mean, if you plan to transition an airport from 40,000 small private aircraft movements a year to suddenly landing 737s and heavy cargo jets,
Oh, people are going to be upset.
the noise complaints from the surrounding neighborhoods must be deafening, right?
You would think so. But the noise complaint metric is actually the most surprising data point of the entire master plan.
Really?
Pilon noted that despite hosting 4 public open houses, conducting a massive presentation circuit, and pushing the master plan all across social media, the airport has received exactly 1 formal noise complaint call.
Wait, what? One single complaint for a commercial airport expansion seems statistically impossible.
It is crazy, but it's only possible because of some highly unusual, really forward-thinking urban planning.
Okay, what did they do?
Back in 1984, local planners implemented strict land use compatibility zoning around YCM.
1984.
Yeah, they didn't just, draw a line on a map. They actively sterilized the flight path corridors, completely preventing high-density residential subdivisions from encroaching on the runway approaches.
That is incredible.
Yeah, the foresight of planners 40 years ago preserved the airspace, making this expansion viable today without, displacing thousands of angry homeowners.
Marco Marino did offer a very sobering warning about interpreting that lack of complaints, though.
Yeah.
He pointed out that in typical municipal affairs, only about 30% of the public actively pays attention.
Right.
The people showing up to these Chamber of Commerce events, they are that 30%. The true hurdle for YCM isn't the engaged minority. It's educating the other 70% of the region before ground is even broken.
Because public relations must outpace the backhoes.
Exactly.
If that 70% remains uninformed, they only discover the master plan when the construction equipment physically rolls down their street. And that is precisely when political backlash kills infrastructure projects.
Totally. We are really watching a fascinating transition here. YCM is trying to evolve from this hidden 97-year-old local airstrip into a massive, self-sustaining regional engine.
Yeah, it's a huge shift.
So it requires shifting the entire identity of the Niagara region from, a place you have to drive to into a place you seamlessly arrive at.
Absolutely.
So if you're listening to this, I want you to look at the geography of your own city. What 60-meter head starts are sitting dormant in your local infrastructure?
That's a great question.
Right. Like, what old asset is just waiting for a terminal upgrade or a strategic data test or a regional partnership to just absolutely explode in value?
There is one final layer to this that pushes the timeline even further into the future, something you can mull over.
Oh, what's that?
During the keynote, there was this brief discussion about eVTOLs.
eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles.
Exactly. They're essentially high-capacity passenger drones designed for short-range air mobility.
Right.
If eVTOLs become the standard for regional transit over the next decade, the entire dynamic shifts.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Under-the-radar airports, like YCM, could suddenly become the most valuable real estate in North America.
How so?
Well, by utilizing eVTOL networks, travelers could completely bypass the congested airspace and the massive footprint of mega hubs like Pearson entirely.
That's nuts.
Right. Local municipal airports would transform into the primary nodes for a completely new layer of the transportation grid.
So the front door they're building today might end up bypassing the legacy aviation system entirely tomorrow. That is a lot to process.
It sure is.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you next time.